The BFG is directed by Steven Spielberg, written by Melissa Matheson. It's based, of course, on the book by Roald Dahl and stars Ruby Barnhill and Mark Rylance. And the BFG is about a little orphan girl named Sophie, played by Ruby Barnhill, who gets taken by a big friendly giant, played by Mark Rylance, to Giant Country. There, they must figure out a way to stop the larger and more bloodthirsty giants from eating children back in the human world. Now, there was no way I wasn't gonna watch this movie because the BFG is one of my favorite childhood books when I was growing up. I still remember a lot of it, and I was really excited to hear that both Disney and Steven Spielberg were doing the adaptation. And the BFG is a fantastic looking movie with really good acting in it. However, as good as it is, I'm not entirely sure if I liked it that much, in the sense that, it's just so lacking in structure that I didn't find myself as invested as I wanted to be. Disney can do no wrong with their visual effects at this point. The CGI they use for the BFG himself as the CGI creation is really impressive and it's totally believable. You believe that this thing is in the room with Ruby Barnhill, and what surprised me is that this character model is really detailed, from the way his ears move to just the detail in his face and in his clothing. And what the visual effects get really right in this movie is the sense of scale, especially when these giants are interacting with each other and fighting. You get the sense that Sophie is just this really tiny thing in the midst of all this giant stuff. But what might be just as impressive as the VFX in this movie is the production design. When Sophie ends up in the BFG's house in Giant Country, a lot of the set is straight out of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, because she's just kind of, being swept away by pipes and whatnot. And what's impressive is that you can tell that a lot of these little things in the set are practical, that they're there, and it's like this little roller coaster ride for Ruby Barnhill. And when the story eventually ends up involving the Queen at Buckingham Palace, that stuff looks really lavish as well. But really what makes so much of this movie believable is the fact that your two main actors here, Ruby Barnhill and Mark Rylance, are just so extremely committed to their roles. I think Ruby Barnhill was perfectly cast as Sophie. She really comes across like how I imagined her in the book. She has this good fairy tale vibe about her that, she doesn't really play the character in such a realistic way, but she does exude this consistent sense of wonder and warmth that really makes you fall in love with her just off the bat. And you also definitely fall in love with the BFG because Mark Rylance he continues to be one of the most sympathetic actors of recent years, and he really just inhabits this character so well, from his speech patterns to his facial expressions. You believe he is the BFG, and it's a very lived-in performance, which is hard to pull off for a motion capture thing. The music in this movie is great as well, and the entire time I was thinking, is this John Williams? Did Spielberg actually get the usual suspects for this production? And I was surprised when the credits rolled that he did. He got the same cinematographer, he got John Williams. Speaking of Spielberg, let's talk about this direction in this movie. I guess Spielberg's biggest strength, in my opinion, at least when it comes to these kinds of movies, is that he really knows how to make magic feel plausible. You never question anything in this movie because he just has a knack for making you accept it and for making you believe that magic exists in this universe. I do think that the BFG is a really good project for him because of that natural talent of his to bring out childlike wonder. But of course it's a Spielberg film, so this movie has a lot of his trademark dynamic shots wherein he keeps the camera rolling, he keeps it moving around as things take place in the background, which really helps keep the world feel alive. And it's a credit to Melissa Matheson's script that the characters here really come off exactly like how I remember them from the books. They're instantly likable, the relationship between Sophie and the BFG is just so warm and really touching, but it's also made a lot richer, well, a little richer, because of little details that they add that weren't in the books. And you can tell that Melissa Matheson had a lot of fun with the BFG's dialogue, his sort of broken English, that while it's fun to listen to, you always know what he's trying to talk about. And the editing by Michael Kahn keeps the giants' interactions really tense. However, my big problem with the BFG is the fact that it is kind of structureless, which I guess is inevitable because it's such a faithful adaptation, for the most part, to the book. Because the main plot of this movie kind of starts really abruptly, 5 minutes in the movie and Sophie's already taken by the BFG. I would have appreciated, getting to know these characters better, at least Sophie separately, before she gets thrown into the conflict, because as soon as she's there, the developments that follow aren't always that refined. There are lots of little plot strands that aren't picked up eventually. And the whole movie does unfortunately feel a bit too long because so many scenes are stretched out far longer than I think they needed to be, especially the Buckingham Palace scene scene, which I think really overstays its welcome. And while Steven Spielberg is a master director, his bids for comedy in this movie come off a bit too kiddie, so they end up being sort of flat. But in the end though, I really just can't deny that the BFG has a lot of good stuff in it. It is a pretty good movie. I think though it's mostly for diehard fans of the book, because if you try to watch this like casually as a kid's film, it's a bit too weird and offbeat, so it might be a bit difficult. So anyway, those were my thoughts on the BFG. If you guys have seen it, tell me what you thought about it. Whatever you think, whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.